The wind howled through Bitter Creek, Wyoming, carrying grit that stung Elias Boone's weathered face as he guided his mare, Juniper, down the rutted main street. The year was 1878, and the town crouched like a weary dog beneath the shadow of jagged hills. Saloon lights flickered through warped glass, casting a sickly glow on the muddy thoroughfare. Elias's boots, caked with the dust of 100 trails, creaked in the stirrups. His right hand rested near the holstered pistol at his hip, its grip carved with a single word, mercy. The irony wasn't lost on him. 20 years of hunting men for bounties left little room for such a virtue. Now, at 42, he wanted only a bed, a meal, and a life free of blood. Bitter Creek, he'd heard, was quiet, a place to vanish. But the weight of his past clung like the sand in his beard. He tied Juniper outside the rusty Spur saloon, its sign creaking in the gusts. The air smelled of coal dust and sour whiskey. A few miners, faces gaunt from long shifts, shuffled past, their eyes skimming Elias's scarred duster and the rifle slung across his saddle. He felt their stares suspicion, not curiosity. A stranger in a town like this was trouble waiting to happen. Elias tipped his hat, more habit than courtesy, and pushed through the saloon's batwing doors. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the twang of a poorly tuned piano. Miners hunched over tables, cards splayed, while a barmaid wove through the crowd, balancing mugs. She was young, maybe 20, with auburn hair pinned loosely, and eyes sharp enough to cut glass. Clara Dunn, Elias would later learn, was more than just a server. She was the heart of Bitter Creek, though she'd deny it. She caught his gaze, nodded once, and returned to her work. Elias took a stool at the bar, the wood groaning under his weight. Whiskey, he said to the barkeep, a wiry man with a drooping mustache. The drink came fast, amber liquid sloshing in a smudged glass. Elias sipped, letting the burn settle his nerves. He'd ridden 3 days from Cheyenne, dodging memories of the men he'd killed, bounties claimed, lives snuffed out, each one chipped at his soul, leaving him hollow. Bitter Creek was his last chance to be something else. The saloon doors swung open, admitting a gust and 3 men in tailored coats, their boots too clean for miners. The room stilled. The leader, broad-shouldered with a waxed mustache, scanned the crowd like a hawk. Gideon Voss. Even Elias, new to town, knew the name. The mine boss owned half the land and wanted the rest. Whispers said he'd burn homes to get it. Voss's eyes landed on Elias, lingering on the pistol at his hip. A smirk flickered, then vanished. He and his men took a table near the piano, their presence a weight on the room. Clara approached Elias, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're new," she said, voice low but steady. "Passing through, hoping to stay," Elias replied, meeting her gaze. Her eyes held no fear, only a quiet challenge. Folks don't stay in Bitter Creek unless they're desperate or stubborn. She leaned closer, her voice a whisper. "Which are you?" Elias's jaw tightened. He wasn't sure himself. Before he could answer, a miner at a nearby table stood, chair scraping. "Voss," the man shouted, voice slurred. "You can't take my land. I got rights." Voss didn't rise. He sipped his drink, calm as a snake in the sun. "Rights don't pay debts, Tom," he said, his voice smooth but edged. "Sign the contract or you'll have nothing." The miner, Tom, swayed, fists clenched. Clara moved to intervene, but Elias's hand grazed her arm, a silent warning. He'd seen this before, pride sparking into violence. Tom lunged, clumsy. One of Voss's men stood, drew a derringer and fired. The shot cracked like thunder. Tom crumpled, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. The saloon erupted shouts, chairs toppling, miners scattering. Elias stayed seated, his hand steady on his glass. He'd sworn off fighting, but mercy felt heavy at his hip. Clara knelt beside Tom, pressing a rag to his wound, her face pale but resolute. "Get him to dock," she snapped at a bystander. Her eyes flicked to Elias, searching, accusing. "You just sit there? Didn't come here to kill," Elias said, voice low. His past whispered otherwise, names, faces, graves. Clara's lips thinned. "Then why'd you come?" Voss stood, brushing his coat. "Take this as a lesson," he said to the room. "Bitter Creek's mine. Fight me, and you bleed." His men dragged Tom out, leaving a trail of red. Voss's gaze lingered on Elias again before he left. The doors swinging shut, the saloon settled, but the air was taut. Clara stood, hands bloodied, and faced Elias. "You carry that gun for show?" she asked. "It's not for show," Elias said, finishing his whiskey. But I'm done using it, she scoffed, turning away. You won't last here. Nobody does. Elias watched her go, the weight of mercy heavier now. He'd come to Bitter Creek to escape his past, but trouble had a way of finding him. Outside, the wind howled louder, rattling the windows. A storm was coming, and not just the kind that brought snow. He stepped into the night, Juniper snorting as he untied her. The town felt smaller now, its lights dimmer. Across the street, the old sheriff's office stood dark, its badge long abandoned. Elias's fingers brushed Mercy's grip, the carved word mocking him. He'd refused to draw tonight, but how long could that last? Bitter Creek wasn't a place for peace, it was a battleground, and he'd just stepped onto it. The dawn broke over Bitter Creek like a cracked egg, spilling pale light across the frost-dusted hills. Elias Boone stood outside the livery stable, his breath fogging in the chill. Juniper, his mare, munched hay inside, her warmth a small comfort against the biting wind. Elias's fingers, stiff from the cold, traced the word mercy on his pistol's grip. Last night's bloodshed in the rusty spur lingered in his mind. Tom's crumpled form, Clara's accusing stare. He'd come to this town to bury his past, but the past, like the Wyoming wind, didn't stay buried. Today, he'd find a boarding house and keep his head down. Or so he planned. The stable door creaked, and Clara Dunn stepped out, her auburn hair catching the morning light. She carried a bucket, her apron smudged with soot, her eyes, sharp as flint, fixed on Elias. Didn't expect you up this early, she said, setting the bucket down. Thought strangers like you slept till noon. Habit, Elias replied, voice rough from disuse. You work the stables too? Work where I'm needed, she said, brushing her hands. Town's short on hands since Voss started squeezing folks out. Her tone carried a barb, aimed at his inaction last night. Elias met her gaze, steady but guarded. I ain't here to fight your battles, miss. Clara's lips twitched, not quite a smile. Then why are you still here? He didn't answer. Truth was, he didn't know. Something about Bitter Creek, the defiance in her eyes, the desperation in Tom's shout stirred a part of him he'd tried to kill. He turned to Juniper, checking her saddle, avoiding Clara's scrutiny. She didn't let up. Tom's alive thanks to Doc, but Voss's men'll be back. They always are. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. You carry that gun like it means something. So, what's it for, if not to help? Elias's jaw clenched. Mercy was a promise, a vow to stop killing. But explaining that to her felt like bearing a wound. It's for me, he said finally. Not for hire, Clara snorted, grabbing her bucket. Suit yourself, stranger. She started toward the saloon, then paused. If you're staying, boarding house is down the street. Mrs. Hale's fair, but don't cross her. Elias watched her go, the wind tugging at her skirt. He should have mounted Juniper and ridden out. Instead, he led the mare toward the boarding house, the town waking around him, miners trudging to the silver mines, shopkeepers sweeping porches. The air smelled of coal and pine, sharp against the morning frost. Mrs. Hale's boarding house was a 2-story clapboard building, its paint peeling like old skin. Elias secured a room for $1 a week, his few belongings a bedroll, a spare shirt, and a tattered Bible stacked in a corner. The room was small, the mattress thin, but it was a start. He sat on the bed, mercy resting on his knee. The carved word mocked him. Redemption wasn't found in a quiet room, it was earned in the dirt. Midday brought him back to the street, hunger driving him toward the saloon for a meal. The town buzzed now, but tension hung like smoke. Miners whispered in clusters, glancing at the mine entrance where Voss's men patrolled, rifles slung low. Elias kept his head down, but trouble found him anyway. Boone, Clara's voice cut through the noise. She stood outside the saloon, her face tight with urgency. Need your help? Now. Elias hesitated. What kind? Miners are riled up, planning to march on Voss's office. It'll end in blood if someone doesn't talk sense into them. She grabbed his arm, her grip firm. You've seen fights like this. Help me stop it. He pulled free, his instinct to walk away warring with the plea in her eyes. I ain't a peacemaker. Then be a voice, she snapped. Or do you just watch folks die? Her words stung, sharp as a whip. Elias followed her, cursing himself. The crowd was gathering near the old sheriff's office, a dozen miners clutching picks and shovels. Their leader, a wiry man named Jed, stood on a crate, shouting, Voss can't own us. We take his office. We take the town. The miners roared, but Elias saw fear in their eyes, fear of Voss, fear of failure. Clara pushed through, raising her hands. Jed, this ain't the way. Voss wants you to fight. Gives him an excuse to kill. Jed sneered. Easy for you to say, Clara. You ain't got land he's stealing. Elias stepped forward, his presence quieting the crowd. She's right, he said, voice low but carrying. Voss has men, guns, money. You march now. You're dead before sundown. Jed's eyes narrowed. Who are you to talk, stranger? Someone who's seen enough graves, Elias said. You want to fight? Pick your moment. This ain't it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara shot him a glance, surprised but grateful. Jed wavered, then spat in the dirt. Fine. For now. The miners dispersed, grumbling, but the spark of violence fizzled. Clara turned to Elias, her expression softer. Didn't think you'd speak up, didn't plan to, he admitted. You're trouble, Clara Dunn. She laughed, a sound like clear water. You're one to talk. Their moment broke as hoofbeats thundered. 3 of Voss's men rode up, led by the one who'd shot Tom Cole, a lean killer with dead eyes. Clara, he said, smirking. Heard you're stirring up the rabble, helping folk, Cole. She shot back. Something you wouldn't understand. Cole's gaze shifted to Elias, lingering on Mercy. New friend? Careful, stranger. This town chews up heroes. He spurred his horse, the others following, leaving dust in their wake. Elias and Clara stood in the settling grit, the town's eyes on them. They'll be back, she said quietly. Voss don't let defiance slide. Then why stay? Elias asked, echoing her earlier question. She pulled a small journal from her apron, its pages worn. This town's my family. They're broken, scared, but they're mine. I won't leave 'em to Voss. Her eyes met his, steady. You could help, you know. Elias looked away, the weight of mercy heavy again. He'd bonded with Clara in this moment, their shared stand forging a tie he hadn't wanted. But ties meant risk, meant caring, and caring led to graves. Night fell, the wind turning sharp. Elias sat in his room, cleaning Mercy by lamplight. Clara's words echoed family, defiance, help. He'd come to Bitter Creek to escape, but the town was pulling him in. Outside, a wolf howled, its cry swallowed by the growing storm. Voss's men were circling, and Elias knew they'd strike soon. The question was whether he'd stand with Clara or ride away before the blood started spilling. The sun hung low over Bitter Creek, painting the jagged hills in hues of rust and gold, but the air carried a chill that bit through Elias Boone's duster. It was midday, 1878, and the town thrummed with uneasy life, miners hauling ore carts, merchants bartering flour for pelts, and children darting through alleys, their laughter sharp against the clatter of the silver mines. The wind, ever present, whipped dust into spirals, stinging eyes and coating tongues with the taste of coal and earth. Bitter Creek was a town alive but bruised, its pulse quickened by fear of Gideon Voss, the mine boss whose shadow loomed larger than the hills. Elias stood outside Mrs. Hale's boarding house, his hand brushing the grip of Mercy, the pistol he'd sworn not to draw. Yesterday's standoff with the miners had bought time, but time, like water in this parched land, was running out. Clara Dunn emerged from the Rusty Spur saloon across the street, her auburn hair tucked under a scarf to fend off the dust. She carried her journal, its leather cover worn smooth, and her eyes scanned the crowd with a mix of hope and dread. Since their talk yesterday, Elias felt a tie to her, a dangerous one. She'd roped him into calming the miners, and now the town saw him as something he wasn't, a savior. He wanted to tell her to leave him be, to let him fade into the background, but her defiance, her belief in this broken place, kept him rooted. Trouble's brewing, Clara said, striding up. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles whitened around the journal. Voss posted notices. He's raising rents on the claims. Folks can't pay, they lose their land. Elias's jaw tightened. He's pushing for a fight. He always does, she said, glancing at the mine entrance where Voss's men lounged, rifles glinting. Town's meeting at the church tonight. They're scared, but they're angry. You coming? Ain't my fight, Elias said, but the words felt hollow. Clara's eyes held his, searching, and he looked away, toward the hills where storm clouds gathered, dark as a bruise. You keep saying that, she said softly, but you're still here. He didn't answer. She walked off, leaving him with the weight of Mercy and the town's growing desperation. Bitter Creek wasn't just a dot on the map, it was a microcosm of the frontier, where law bent to money, and survival demanded grit. The mines fueled everything, their silver veins drawing men from Denver to San Francisco, but Voss controlled the ore, the water, the land. His contracts, written in fine ink, were shackles disguised as promises. Elias had seen it before towns bled dry by men like Voss, leaving only ghosts and dust. By dusk, the town gathered in the old church, a sagging relic with a cracked bell and pews worn smooth by years of prayer. Elias lingered at the back, hat low, as Clara stood at the pulpit, her journal open. Miners, shopkeepers, and families filled the room, their faces etched with worry. Jed, the wiry miner from yesterday, stood near the front, his fists clenched. The air smelled of candle wax and sweat, and the wind rattled the broken stained glass windows, casting jagged shadows. "We can't pay Voss's rents," Clara said, her voice clear. "He knows it. He wants us to fold, to sign over our homes. But this is our town." Jed slammed a fist on a pew. "We fight, burn his office down." Murmurs rose, some nodding, others pale. Clara raised a hand. "Fighting's what he expects. We need to stand together, refuse his terms, hold our claims. He can't evict us all." A woman in a faded bonnet stood, voice trembling. "He'll send Cole and his killers. My boy's already hurt from the mines." "What then?" The room stilled. Elias felt eyes on him, expectant. He stayed silent, his past whispering blood, bounties, bodies left in the dirt. Clara glanced his way, her expression a plea. Before she could speak, the church doors banged open. Gideon Voss strode in, flanked by Cole and another gunman, their boots echoing on the warped floorboards. Voss's tailored coat and waxed mustache marked him as a man apart, but his eyes were cold, predatory. The crowd parted, fear rippling like a stone in a pond. "Fine gathering," Voss said, his voice smooth as oil. "But you're wasting breath. My rents are fair. Pay or leave. Simple." Jed stepped forward, spitting at Voss's feet. "You're a thief, Voss. We won't bow." Voss's smile didn't waver. "Defiance has a cost, Jed." He nodded to Cole, who drew his derringer, the same one that felled Tom. The crowd gasped, mothers pulling children close. Elias's hand twitched near Mercy, his vow to avoid violence straining. Clara moved between Jed and Cole, her journal clutched like a shield. "Enough, Voss. You can't bully us all. We're signing a pact nobody sells. Bitter Creek stands." Voss's eyes narrowed, but his smile held. "A pact? Charming, but paper don't stop bullets." He turned to the crowd. "Sign my contracts by dawn, or my men start clearing claims. Starting with yours, Jed." The miners roared, surging forward. Cole raised his gun, but Elias stepped into the aisle, his presence a quiet thunder. "Lower it," he said to Cole, voice low, steady. The gunman hesitated, recognizing something in Elias's scarred face, a man who'd killed and lived to regret it. Voss studied Elias, curious. "The stranger speaks." "Got a name?" "Boone," Elias said. "And you're pushing too hard." Voss chuckled. "A man with a gun like that don't stay neutral long. Choose a side, Boone." He turned, his men following, leaving the church in silence. The crowd erupted, voices clashing, fear, anger, hope. Clara grabbed Elias's arm, pulling him outside into the cold night. The wind howled, carrying the distant rumble of thunder. "You stood up," she said, breathless. "Why?" "Didn't plan to," Elias growled. "Your town's got a death wish." "Then help us," she urged, her journal open to a page of names. "The pact. We're family here, broken or not. You could be too." Elias looked at the names, then at the town's flickering lights. Bitter Creek was alive, messy, defiant, a world of hardscrabble dreamers fighting for a scrap of earth. He wanted to walk away, but Clara's words, the town's pulse, held him. Voss's threat hung heavy, and dawn was hours away. Mercy felt heavier still, its promise bending under the weight of a town on the edge. The pre-dawn air in Bitter Creek was sharp as a blade, slicing through Elias Boone's duster as he stood outside the Rusty Spur saloon. The town lay quiet, its wooden facades silvered by moonlight, but tension hung heavy, thicker than the coal dust coating the streets. Hours ago, in the church, the townsfolk had defied Gideon Voss, signing Clara Dunn's pact to hold their claims. Now, Voss's deadline loomed with the rising sun. Elias's fingers grazed Mercy, the pistol at his hip, its carved word a fading vow. He'd wanted no part of this fight, but Bitter Creek's stubborn hope, Clara's hope, had tethered him. The wind carried a distant rumble, not thunder but hoofbeats. Trouble was coming, and it rode fast. Clara burst from the saloon, her journal tucked under her arm, her face pale but resolute. "They're burning Jed's claim. she said, voice low and urgent. Voss's men. Torches in the hills. We've got to stop them. Elias's gut twisted. Jed, the hot-headed miner, had a shack on the edge of town, near Blackthorn Canyon. Burning it was Voss's warning, a spark to ignite fear. How many? Elias asked. 6, maybe 7, Clara said, already moving toward the stables. Jed's out there with his brother. They'll fight, and they'll die without help. Elias cursed under his breath, following her. You're gonna get yourself killed, Clara. Then come with me, she shot back, yanking a bridle from a hook. Or, watch this town burn from your boarding house. Her words stung, but they were true. Elias grabbed his rifle from Juniper's saddle, the mare snorting as he mounted. Clara swung onto a bay gelding, her skirt hitched high, and they rode hard toward the hills. The night air smelled of frost and pine, the stars dimmed by smoke rising from Jed's claim. Bitter Creek's world was raw, harsh winds, unyielding rock, and men like Voss who'd break a town for silver. But its people, bound by grit and quiet dreams, refused to break. The trail to Blackthorn Canyon was narrow, flanked by scrub pines and boulders. Hoofbeats echoed behind them, miners, roused by Clara's call, riding to join the fight. Elias glanced at her, her jaw set, her journal tied to her saddlebag. That book held the town's defiance, names scrawled in ink, a fragile shield against Voss's greed. He wanted to tell her it wasn't enough, but her fire kept his doubts silent. They reached Jed's claim, a shack dwarfed by the canyon's looming walls. Flames licked the roof, casting an orange glow. Jed and his brother, Will, stood back to back, shotguns raised against 6 of Voss's men, led by Cole, the dead-eyed gunman. Torches blazed in their hands, and a wagon of Jed's belongings burned nearby, acrid smoke stinging Elias's eyes. Cole's voice cut through the crackle. Sign the contract, Jed, or we burn more than your shack. Jed spat, raising his gun. Go to hell, Cole. Elias dismounted, signaling Clara to stay low. The miners, 5 of them, armed with picks and old rifles, spread out, tense but untrained. Elias's past as a bounty hunter surged back, the math of a fight, angles of fire, the weight of a life taken. He'd sworn off killing, but saving Jed meant breaking that vow. Stay back, he whispered to Clara. This'll get ugly. She ignored him, stepping forward, her voice ringing. Cole, stop this. You're tearing Bitter Creek apart. Cole's smirk was cold. Voss owns this town, girl. Step aside, or you're ash too. Elias moved between them, rifle steady. Drop the torches, he said, voice like gravel. Walk away. Cole's eyes flicked to Mercy, then back to Elias's face. Big talk, Boone. You draw that fancy gun, or you just here to watch? The air crackled with tension, the canyon walls amplifying every sound, crackling flames, shifting hooves, Jed's ragged breathing. One of Voss's men tossed a torch at the shack's porch, and Will fired, the shotgun's boom shattering the night. The man fell, clutching his leg, and chaos erupted. Voss's men drew, bullets spitting into the dirt. Jed and Will ducked behind a water trough, returning fire. The miners scrambled, their shots wild. Elias tackled Clara behind a boulder as a bullet whined past. Stay down, he growled. She clutched her journal, eyes fierce, but nodded. He rose, rifle barking, aiming for shoulders and legs. 2 of Voss's men dropped, groaning. Cole fired back, his derringer flashing. A miner screamed, falling with a bullet in his arm. Elias's heart pounded, old instincts screaming to end Cole, to paint the canyon red. But Mercy stayed holstered, its weight a reminder of his promise. Clara crawled to the wounded miner, tearing her scarf to bind his arm. We can't hold them, she shouted. They'll burn everything. Elias scanned the canyon. The narrow trail was their only way out, but Voss's men blocked it, their torches closing in. Fall back, he yelled to Jed. Into the canyon. Jed hesitated, then nodded, dragging Will toward the shadows. The miners followed, stumbling over rocks. Elias fired again, keeping Cole's men pinned, but a bullet grazed his shoulder, hot pain flaring. He grunted, blood soaking his sleeve, but held his ground until Clara grabbed his arm. Move, Boone. They ran, the canyon's walls closing around them like a trap. The trail twisted, lined with scrub and loose shale. Hoofbeats thundered Cole and his men in pursuit, their torches bobbing like wraiths. Elias's shoulder throbbed, but he pushed Clara ahead, guiding the group deeper into Blackthorn Canyon. The air grew colder, the wind howling through the rocks. Carrying the scent of damp stone and fear, they reached a fork. the trail splitting into a steep climb and a narrow ravine. Elias halted, breath ragged. "Ravine's a choke point," he said. "We can hold them there." Clara shook her head, her journal clutched tight. "Or, we're trapped. We need to get to the old mine shaft, it's a mile up. We can hide, regroup." Elias cursed. The mine was defensible but a dead end if Voss's men cornered them. "Your call," he said, trusting her instinct. They scrambled up the ravine, the miners panting, Jed and Will limping. The canyon's walls loomed, their shadows swallowing the moonlight. Behind, Cole's shouts grew closer, his men's torches flickering. At the mine shaft, a rusted gate sagged on its hinges. Elias pried it open, ushering the group inside. The air was dank, smelling of earth and decay. Clara lit a lantern from her saddlebag, its glow revealing timber supports and scattered tools, a relic of Bitter Creek's early days. "We hold here," she said, setting her journal on a crate. "They can't burn us out." Elias nodded, posting the miners at the entrance with their rifles. His shoulder burned, blood dripping to the dirt, but he ignored it, checking Mercy's rounds. Clara noticed, tearing a strip from her skirt to bind his wound. "You're no good dead," she muttered, her touch firm but gentle. "Didn't plan on dying," Elias said, meeting her eyes. For a moment the canyon's chaos faded. They were bound now, not just by the fight but by something deeper, a shared refusal to let Bitter Creek fall. Hoofbeats echoed outside. Cole's voice rang out, cold and mocking. "Boone, Clara, come out, or we drag you out." Elias gripped his rifle, Mercy heavy at his hip. The siege was on, and the canyon held its breath. Dawn was close, and with it, Voss's deadline. Bitter Creek's world, its dust, its dreams, its defiance hung in the balance, and Elias knew he couldn't walk away. Dawn broke over Blackthorn Canyon, its pale light filtering through the mine shaft's rusted gate, where Elias Boone crouched, rifle ready. The air was thick with damp earth, and the tang of blood from his bandaged shoulder, the wound throbbing with each heartbeat. Outside, Gideon Voss's men, led by the cold-eyed Cole, circled like wolves, their torches dimmed by the rising sun but their threat undimmed. Clara Dunn knelt beside Elias, her lantern casting shadows across her journal, its pages filled with the town's packed names that bound Bitter Creek's people against Voss's greed. The miners, Jed, Will, and 3 others, gripped their weapons, faces etched with fear and defiance. The siege had held through the night, but Voss's deadline was here, and Bitter Creek's fate hung on this moment. Elias's fingers brushed Mercy, the pistol at his hip, its carved word a taunt. He'd sworn off killing, but the canyon's narrow walls, the miners' ragged breaths, and Clara's steady gaze pressed against his resolve. Bitter Creek wasn't just a town, it was a living thing, raw and stubborn, its streets of dust and wood pulsing with dreams of freedom. Elias had come to escape his past, but this place, these people, had made him part of something larger. He glanced at Clara, her auburn hair streaked with dirt, her eyes fierce. "We can't hold here forever," he said, voice low. "Then we don't," Clara replied, clutching her journal. "We take the fight to Voss, in town, where the people are." Elias's gut churned. A showdown in Bitter Creek meant blood, maybe his own. "He'll have more men there," he warned. "And no cover like this." She met his gaze, unyielding. "It's not about winning a fight. It's about showing we won't break." Her words struck deep, echoing the guilt of lives he'd taken as a bounty hunter. Redemption wasn't a quiet bed, it was this, standing for something. He nodded, turning to the miners. "We ride for town. Fast. Stay low. Hit hard." Jed, his face bruised from the night's fight, grinned grimly. "About time, Boone." They slipped out the mine's back exit, a narrow tunnel opening to a scrub-covered slope. The wind howled, carrying the scent of pine and smoke from Jed's burned shack. Elias led, Juniper's hooves steady on the rocky trail, Clara and the miners close behind. The canyon's walls loomed, their shadows shrinking as the sun climbed. Cole's shouts faded behind, they'd lost the trail, for now. But Elias knew Voss would be waiting in Bitter Creek, his contracts and guns ready to crush the town's defiance. The ride back was brutal, the wind cutting like glass, dust stinging their eyes. Bitter Creek emerged through the haze, its saloon, church, and mine entrance stark against the hills. The town was awake, tense miners and families gathered in the street, clutching tools and old rifles. Word of the pact had spread, and Clara's stand had lit a fire. Elias dismounted near the rusty spur, his shoulder aching, Mercy heavy. Clara rallied the townsfolk, her journal raised like a flag. "Voss thinks we'll fold," she shouted. "But we're Bitter Creek. We hold." The crowd roared, a mix of fear and grit. Elias scanned the street, spotting Voss's men, 10 now, including Cole, fanning out from the mine office. Voss himself stood on the office porch, his tailored coat pristine, a ledger in hand. His voice carried, smooth and sharp. "Your pack's worthless. Sign my contracts, or I clear this town by noon." Elias stepped forward, rifle slung, Mercy at his hip. The crowd parted, eyes on him. Stranger turned protector. "You've pushed enough, Voss," he said. "Leave these folks be." Voss's smile was cold. "Boone, I knew you'd pick a side. Pity it's the losing one." He nodded to Cole, who raised his derringer, flanked by men with rifles. The townsfolk tensed, some raising weapons, others clutching children. Clara stood beside Elias, her journal open. "We're not signing," she said. "This town's ours." Voss laughed, but his eyes were steel. "Then you burn," he signaled, and Cole fired, the shot grazing a miner's arm. The street erupted gunfire, screams, the clatter of hooves as Voss's men charged. Elias dove, pulling Clara behind a water trough. Bullets splintered wood, and the air filled with dust and gunpowder's acrid bite. Jed and Will fired back, their shotguns booming, while townsfolk scattered or fought, their courage raw but untested. Elias's instincts roared, "Draw Mercy, end this." He'd killed men like Cole before, quick and clean, but each death had carved a piece of him away. He fired his rifle instead, clipping a gunman's leg, then another's shoulder. "Stay down," he yelled to Clara, who was binding the wounded miner's arm with her scarf. She glared, defiant. "I'm not hiding, Boone." She darted to a fallen woman, dragging her to safety. Elias cursed, covering her with gunfire, his shoulders screaming with each shot. The fight surged, chaotic. A miner fell, blood pooling in the dirt. Jed took a bullet to the hand but kept firing. Elias saw Voss on the porch, untouched, his ledger clutched like a shield. The man's greed had broken towns before, but Bitter Creek fought back shopkeepers with axes, mothers with shovels. Elias's heart pounded. This was their stand, their family. Cole broke through, his derringer aimed at Clara. Elias acted on instinct, tackling him into the dirt. They grappled, Cole's gun skittering away. "You're dead, Boone," Cole snarled, drawing a knife. Elias blocked the blade, pain flaring in his wounded shoulder, and drove his fist into Cole's jaw. The gunman crumpled, out cold. Elias stood, breath ragged, and faced Voss. The street quieted, gunfire fading as both sides paused, bloodied and spent. Voss's men wavered, outnumbered by the town's resolve. Elias's hand hovered over Mercy, the moment heavy. He could draw, kill Voss, end this now. His past whispered blood for blood, but Clara's voice cut through, soft but firm. "Elias, don't. Not like this." She stood beside him, journal in hand, the town behind her. Her eyes held his, pleading for something better than vengeance. Elias's hand trembled, Mercy's weight a choice. Killing Voss would save Bitter Creek but damn him further, or he could trust the town's strength. Clara's pact, their unity. He lowered his hand. "You're done, Voss," he said, voice steady. "Your men are beaten. Leave, or the town finishes this." Voss's smile faded, his ledger slipping. The crowd closed in, their faces hard. Miners, mothers, children, united. Voss's men dropped their weapons, sensing the tide. "This ain't over," Voss spat, but he backed away, mounting his horse. His men followed, retreating into the hills, dust trailing like a fading storm. The town erupted in cheers, weary but triumphant. Clara hugged Jed, then turned to Elias, her eyes bright. "You stayed," she said, voice breaking. "Didn't have a choice," Elias said, a half smile tugging his lips. His shoulder ached, Mercy untouched. He'd chosen the town over his past, and it felt like a weight lifted, if only a little. By noon, Bitter Creek began to heal. Clara's journal, now a symbol, was passed among the townsfolk, new names added. The old sheriff's badge, dusted off, was pinned on Jed. Elias watched from the saloon's porch, Juniper tied nearby. He could ride out now, his vow unbroken. But Clara's laugh, the town's pulse, held him. Bitter Creek had become his family, and for the first time, redemption felt possible.